I thank you. Good afternoon, everyone. I would like to call the meeting to order and acknowledge that we are in Treaty 1 territory, the home and traditional lands of the Ojibwe, Cree, and Dakota peoples, and in the national homeland of the Red River Métis. Our drinking water comes from Shoal Lake 40 First Nation in Treaty 3 territory. My name is Carrie Linklater. I am your chairperson this afternoon, and I am joined on the panel via Zoom by Ms. Linda McFadden and Mr. Ron Merritt. From the Assessment Department is Ms. Corrine Durakny, and our administrative personnel is Ms. Twinkle Sharma. We will be hearing applications for revision of the assessment roll in accordance with the Municipal Assessment Act. The matters for which revision is requested have been described in each application, and we will limit discussion to those matters. The statements that are made at this hearing are sworn testimony, and anyone speaking to the matters must be sworn in. Be advised that comparisons of assessments of properties are not considered evidence of market value by the Board of Revision. The Board of Revision is appointed annually by City Council and is independent of it and the City Administration. It makes its decisions on the basis of the evidence provided at this hearing and issues a written order that will be mailed to all parties as soon as possible. Please note that the board's decisions with respect to an application may be appealed to the Manitoba Municipal Board if the matter pertains to assessed value or classification, or to the Court of King's Bench if the matter pertains to the application of exemptions from taxation. Should you wish to appeal, information on how to do so will be included with the board's order. With respect to the hearing process, I will confirm the points of appeal with your property to be addressed with each applicant following the swearing in. We will then have the assessor's testimony followed by questions that the applicant may have, and then the applicant's testimony followed by questions. Each side will have an opportunity to summarize if they wish. Once all of the evidence about an application has been brought forward, the applicant may leave. The process will repeat for each item on the docket today. The session will close after all the applications have been heard, and the board will deliberate in private and make its decisions. We will receive the board's decision by registered mail as soon as possible. As information, all public hearings are live streamed, recorded, and will be part of the public record. This afternoon, we will be hearing items 4, 6, 7, and 8 on our docket today. And Ms. Sharma, would you please affirm the assessor and the applicant's testimony?
For sure. Ms. Assessor, please state your full name.
Karine Dorakini.
Do you affirm that the evidence you're about to provide at this hearing is the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth?
I do.
Thank you. Mr. Applicant, please state your full name.
My name is Jared Story.
Do you affirm that the evidence you're about to provide at this hearing is the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth?
Yes, I do.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Sharma. Good afternoon to you, Mr. Story and Ms. Durakany. And we are looking at our first item on the docket, item 4, which is 360 Dawson Road. And we are looking at assessed value. And Ms. Durakany, whenever you are ready to proceed.
Thank you, Madam Chair. File number 24-3363, roll number 0603234800 for the address of 360 Dawson Road North. We are defending the assessed value of $4,485,000 for the 2025 roll year based on the reference date of April 1, 2023. It consists of 5 buildings with 1 premise and 1 story. Actual year built is 1958 to 2000 with an effective year built of 1976. Wall height of 12 to 24 feet with a leasable area of 52,660 square feet and a land to plan area of 2.58. Our page 3 has a few maps. It is located in the Mission Industrial Area near Dugald Road. Some aerial views are provided on page 4 through 7. Some exterior photos, page 8 and 9. You will find our rent comparables are on page 10. We've provided 6 of them. All our storage warehouses like the subject. With a leasing starting in 2017 to 2021, an area range of 42,480 to 61,400 square feet, wall height of 18 to 30 feet, an effective year build of 1961 to 1980, and a net rent of $5.67 to $8.27 per square foot. Our income workup is provided on page 11. The one premise of 52,660 square feet with a rent of $6.46 per square foot, provide a potential rent of $340,184. We reduced that by a vacancy loss of 3% plus expenses at 3% with a shortfall at $4 per square foot. This gives us the net operating income of $313,760. We've capitalized that at 7%, in which generates our capitalized value of $4,482,286, with an additional building value of $3,000, in which is liquid nitrogen tanks, totaling up to our final total of $4,485,000. Page 13 has our capitalization rates. Our 7% is on the higher end of the 80th percentile of our industrial range. Page 15, wrapping up on page 16 is the income and expense questionnaire we received, advising owner occupied. Based on this evidence, we believe that the assessed value of $4,485,000 to be fair and equitable and ask for it to be confirmed. Thank you.
Thank you. Mr. Story, any questions?
Yes, I do. Thank you, Madam Chair. Mr. Rockney, this assessment, is this all model derived, model generated?
It is, yes.
Okay. All right. And sorry, you'd mentioned that it's warehousing, but can we agree this is a metal fabrication shop? That's what goes on here.
All I'm aware of is that it's occupied by Champ Industries. I'm not 100% certain what they do exactly.
Okay, so they're a metal fabricator, but it's zoned M3, correct?
Correct, yes.
Okay. Would you agree with me that properties where, particularly metal fabrication, but these heavier industrial uses typically there's more wear and tear on the buildings? Is that a fair comment?
Yeah, I'd say that's fair.
Okay, and can we agree as well that when we have some of these heavier industrial processes going on, the insurance, for example, is a fair bit higher than a typical storage warehouse? Is that a fair comment?
That I would not know, to be honest.
Okay. Were you able to review, excuse me, the historic income and expense mailers from the property in preparation?
No, only the one concerning the cycle.
Okay, that's fine. I'll get to that in my presentation. Now, in terms of the siting and the actual site, can we agree this is an irregular parcel?
It is a bit of an irregular shape.
Okay, and it's pinned in by that rail line at its northern border. Is that fair?
I think the rail line, but yeah.
Okay, and the city quite rightly regards that as an influence. Presumably that would be a negative influence on record. Is that fair? The rail line?
It would be a tad of a negative influence, but depending on the business itself, it's used for storage.
Okay, but it does, just to be fair, that would preclude the owner from expanding the operation further. So that's about as good as it's going to get in terms of how they're able to use the site in terms of development going forward. Is that fair? Okay, and that land to building, that's fairly low at sub 3:1. Is that a fair comment?
Yes.
Okay. And then the rents that you've applied here, they're modeled and were slightly higher. So I'll leave that. In terms of the capitalization rates, now you've mentioned that it is indeed all modeled. Did the city review any industrial sales to determine these this cap rate table that they've presented here?
No, we did not. Just modeled.
Okay. Those are my questions. Thank you, Madam Chair.
Thank you. Ms. McFadden, any questions for the assessor?
I have no further questions. Thank you.
Thank you. And Mr. Merritt?
I have none, Madam.
Thank you. Mr. Rockney, I was just wondering, in regards to the wall height, you've got a range of wall height from 12 to 24, I believe.
Yes, that would be due to the 5 buildings.
Correct. So I was just wondering, do you know what the portion is? Like, is it 3 buildings have a 12-foot and the other 2 have 24? Or do you know what the lay of the land is here?
I would have to quickly look it up. Usually I have a chance to have that ready, but I did not. Should take me just a moment. So we have one building, 5,000 square feet of 12-foot wall height. And then a 1,250 square feet, also 12 feet. Then a 29,160 square feet for the 24-foot. A small 510 square feet for the 13 feet wall height. And then a 17,250 square feet for 16 feet.
Okay. And each of these 5 buildings, I'm assuming, were each built separately between 58 and 2000, correct?
Correct.
Okay. Do you know the years of these five buildings you've just given with the square footage?
Yeah, so the first one, the 5,000 square feet was in 1958. The 1,250 square feet was built in 1979. The 29,160 square feet was built in 1978, so just before that. The 510 square feet was built in 1985. And then the last 17,250 square feet was built in 2000.
All right. I thank you. That is all my questions. And Mr. Story, if you would like to proceed.
Yes, thank you, Madam Chair. Okay, so here we are at 360 Dawson North. This is indeed a metal fabrication shop, as we've pointed out. The original age, that first build is 1958. That's that masonry structure that's right up front. Now, if you look on my first page, that's actually that's a good indicator of some of the issues that we have here. Parking is a major issue. We'll get to that in a moment, but you can see that there's a bit of a scattered parking situation at the front of that original building. The owner also owns the property, the adjacent property, and requires the use of some of that lot for the parking for this property. So we haven't made an adjustment there. We've tried to capture the adjusted risk in the cap rate. Okay, so Madam Chair, you'd asked about the different vintages of the builds. This is indeed a piecemeal property. It was built up over time. If you look at my page 8, I have it all itemized for you there. You can see what we're calling buildings 1 through 5. I mean, effectively, this is one large building, but it has been built up over time from that original, very old build of 1958. For some of these industrial properties in the city of Winnipeg, 1958 would be a very, very, that would be on the older edge of the for the original vintage. You can also see that this is a unique situation where we have wall heights of 24 feet in about, well, a little over half of, well, about, call it 60% of the property. 24 feet for the gross upper of 29,160. But the balance of the property, those wall heights are severely low, ranging between 12 and 16 feet. For most industrial users in our market today, that would be considered somewhat obsolete. So we have to consider that when we have these piecemeal properties, that some of these issues occur where we have favorable wall heights for part of the property, and then for just under half of it, we have obsolete wall heights. I have some verbiage here regarding the loading doors and the issues with the tight turning radiuses. Part of the reason that we consider land to building, as I mentioned in my questioning, obviously there is that issue that if you are built up effectively to your property line and you're at only 2.5 to 1 land to building, there's an issue in terms of capacity to expand in the future, but there's also the very real immediate issue regarding issues such as parking and loading and unloading trucks. So that has been something that's been reported as a negative to us by the owners, and I've included that here. So, and we would typically expect to see on a property like this no less than, I would say, at least 4 to 1 land to building. So this is very low. We have used a rent of $6.50 per foot. That is not in dispute. The assessor has used $6.46, so I'll leave that. In terms of vacancy, we have applied 3.5%. That would be considered a standard vacancy in our market at this stage. We would expect to see something, depending on location, somewhere between 2 or so, 2.5 to 4.5 as a broad comment. Then we'd adjust if there were any further issues that need to be addressed. The shortfall that we've applied here is 4%, and that's as prescribed. But I mentioned in my questioning, and I was able to go through the historic income and expense submissions by the owner, and they are reporting expenses when you include the business tax of roughly $9 a foot. That's very high. So that's more than double that $4 allowance. And I would presume that does have to do with insurance and upkeep. And as I mentioned, some of these properties, when they are in the heavy industrial and particularly in metal fabrication, you do have a higher degree of insurance, to be certain, and then there is a higher degree of wear and tear on the building. So that has to be captured somewhere. And in order not to double count that effectively, Madam Chair, I've not applied an $8 or $9 shortfall, but I've rather tried to capture the adjusted risk profile in the capitalization rate. So we are accepting the $4 per foot shortfall rate in this instance, but with that caveat that we are attempting to capture those adjusted costs to maintain this property in the capitalization rate. We've provided you with 5 sales. 2 of them are indeed in the St. Boniface Industrial, and those sales are indicating 6.27 at the lower end and 7.09 at the higher end. Now, these would require some adjustments. I would suggest to you that these are higher quality properties, and they are much larger too. But we do have those indicators, and we have provided you a full capitalization rate study, and our conclusions are indeed supported by the broker's reports that we've included as well. And that's what the city has relied upon without their own calculations. So we have considered our own study, our standalone study, those samples of sales that we've provided for you, as well as the brokers. So ultimately, we've applied a cap rate of 7.5% for this property. The NOI, I believe, to be not far off from what the city model has outputted, But based on a site-specific review, I believe that a 7.5 cap is appropriate in this instance, and that leads us to an indicated market value at the reference date of 4,173,709, which we then round to 4,174. So I think I will leave my presentation there, Madam Chair. But ultimately, we feel very confident that the value that we've presented here is well supported based on our submission. We do respectfully submit that the value not exceed 4,174,000. And with that, I thank you, and I'm open to your questions.
I thank you, Mr. Story. Ms. DeRockney, did you have any questions to the applicant?
I may have one. In regards to your sales, page 16, I believe. Were they all in the same area?
No, so what I mentioned was you can see that the second row indicates the geographic area. So we have 2 in Inkster, 2 in St. Boniface Industrial, and 1 in Sargent Park. So we have Mission Industrial, 680 Mission, and then 1 Warman. 1 Warman Road is a vastly superior property. So even though we're suggesting 7.5 for ours, and that one's at just over 6.25, it is supported based on the quality of that property compared to our metal fabrication shop.
Sounds great. I might have one more. In regards to the property itself, you're saying that there's issues with parking. Would you agree that the accessibility of the property is good?
In terms of the access and egress from the main road? Well, no, I wouldn't. I wouldn't say that it's good. I would say that if you look at the overhead view, and you look at that main, if you look where your access and egress points are, and if you don't consider that there's the benefit of common ownership on the adjacent property, you can see very clearly, Mr. Rockney, that when you pull into this property, the original, the legacy building, let's say the 1950s build, almost butts right up to that to the access point. So no, I think that it's, unfortunately, I think the siting is a challenge. The reason that the owner is telling us that is because it is a real issue. And clearly, if you have a 53-foot trailer in this property, you would have to do some jockeying to get it in properly. So no, I don't think it's good. I think everything about the siting and the access and egress and the land to building would be considered negative in most people's eyes.
Even with it having 2 entrance-exit ways?
Most properties would have a point of access and a point of egress, and 2 at a minimum would not be superior. No.
Thank you. Those are my questions.
Thank you. And Ms. McFadden, any questions?
I have no further questions. Thank you.
Thank you. And Mr. Merritt?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Mr. Story, I see that your gross and your NOI are pretty close to the same. The only difference or discrepancy is the city's at 7% and you are at 7.5%. So maybe just enlighten the panel members why you think the subject should be capped at the 7.5%.
Oh, sure. Absolutely. Yes. Thank you, sir. You're quite right. And as I mentioned, Mr. Merritt, many of the issues that we have here, in order to not double count them or over adjust them, we've attempted to capture the inherent elevated risk profile to the asset in the capitalization rate. So as I mentioned, the shortfall rate or the cost to run this property effectively, the expenses run doubly what you would expect to see for a typical storage warehouse. So where we would expect to see $4 a foot, we're somewhere near $9 a foot. And that's back to 2020. So if we have better and more detailed and itemized expenses For 2022, I would presume that they would be higher still. One of the major issues that we see in industrial is the elevation of insurance charges, for example. And as I mentioned, when we have an M3 building that is indeed a metal fabrication shop, where we have you have all sorts of molten metal and gases, and you have airborne silica. You have all sorts of issues in these properties that frankly lead to a higher degree of wear and tear on the property. So it's not simply storing pallets and dropping items off and picking them up and moving them out. This is a manufacturing metal fab shop. So that's one part of it. The second element that we've considered, once again, is that initial legacy build of 1958. We have a very old original portion of this property, and we have a property that's built in a piecemeal fashion. So clearly that would not be as efficient as if we had a property that was built today to spec to meet the business operations of this owner. We have the very, very low land to building ratio, as we've mentioned. We have about or just under half of the property with very, very low, frankly obsolete ceiling heights. And then we're also on a irregular parcel that is pinned in by a rail line. So there are a number of issues that would be considered challenges in the market. So, and again, this 7.5 that we're applying now is consistent with our position in the past, and with the removal of the additional expenses, that 7.5 is, frankly, I believe it to be exactly where it ought to be. So the elevated risk profile is based on the number of those items that I've just illustrated, and I think it's there. I hope they're in the brief in a way that makes sense. But there are a number of issues here where we have to consider how the market might view this property based on those site-specific concerns.
I thank you, Mr. Story. I have no further questions, Madam Chairperson. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Merritt. And my questions have been asked and answered. Does either party have a wish for a summation?
I do not.
No, thank you, Madam Chair. I think I've just rambled on to Mr. Merritt's question, so I'll just ask that those comments be considered my final on this one, and I thank you very much.
All right, thank you. That concludes 360 Dawson. We'll move on to item number 6, which is 115 Debate Street. And there's a preliminary issue on this property. We have a non-co-op. And Mr. Rockme, if you would like to address that for us, please introduce the property.
Yes, of course. And Madam Chair, we are actually not seeking non-compliance for this property as well as the next one.
I'm sorry, you're withdrawing them then?
We are, yes.
Thank you. And you're also withdrawing it on 141 Debate Street?
Correct, yes.
Thank you. Ms. Sharma, you've made note of that?
Yeah, I did.
All right, thank you.
Okay, thanks.
All right, that makes things slightly less complicated. If you would like to continue with your brief, Mr. Rockney.
Of course. Thank you, Madam Chair. File number 24-1617, roll number 06053090 for the address of 115 Debate Street. We are defending the assessed value of $4,387,000 for the 2025 rural year based on the reference date of April 1, 2023. It consists of 2 buildings with 8 premises with 1 story. Actual year built of 1979 to 1988 with an effective year built of 1982. Wall height of 16 to 21 feet. A leasable area of 33,324 square feet and a land to plant area of 2.91. If I can turn your attention to page 2, is a recent sale in 2021 for $4,480,000. We did receive the income and expense questionnaire. Start there since it's in order. It just came to us late. On page 23, shows a variety of the actual rents from $6.75, $8, $10. And then we have our maps provided on page 25. It is located in the St. Boniface Industrial Park, off of Began Avenue. Aerial views are provided on page 26 to 29, and some exterior photos following it. On page 32 has our rent comparables. We've provided many due to the 8 premises having different square footage. They are all flex warehouses like the subject, with leasing starting in 2018 to 2022, an area range of 2,402 square feet to 13,513 square feet, an average wall height of 8 to 24 feet, an effective year built of 1975 to 1988, and a net rent of $6.95 to $10.74 per square foot. Our income workup is on page 33. The 8 premises add up to the 33,324 square feet with a blended rent of $8.54, provide a potential rent of $284,448. We've reduced that by a vacancy loss of 1.5%, plus expenses at 3%, with the shortfall at $4 per square foot. This gives us the net operating income of $269,777, in which we've capitalized that at 6.15%, generating our capitalized value of $4,387,000. Our capitalization rates are on page 35. Our 6.15 is approximately in the middle of our industrial range. We do have some recent permits for interior alterations, adding up to a declared construction value of $548,000. There is also an advertisement on page 39 for 115 Debate Street, in which advises the 4160 square feet for about a net rental rate of $8.95 per square foot and an additional rent of $6.51 per square foot. As well as a second advertisement on page 44 for 133 Debate Street with the same net rental rate and additional rent. Based on this evidence, we believe that the assessed value of $4,387,000 to be fair and equitable, and ask for it to be confirmed. Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Durakny. Any questions, Mr. Story?
Yes, I do. Thank you, Madam Chair. Mr. Rockney, okay, so just very quickly, you'd mentioned a sale, but can we agree the sale that you're referencing is actually a portfolio sale from a large investor to a real estate investment trust, and it included 8 buildings. Are you aware of that?
I was not aware of that. No.
Okay. Now that you are aware of that, is that not, does the city not, typically, my understanding, correct me if I'm wrong, does the city preclude those from ratio studies as per the IAAO standard? Are those sales typically not considered because the purchases, large acquisitions or divestments by REITs or institutional owners are typically not considered in ratio studies? That's my understanding. Is that not correct?
I do not know.
Okay. Okay. So we've dealt with the non-compliance. So I guess firstly, the rents that you've used, and this is indeed all modeled, correct?
Correct.
Okay. In terms of the comparables that we have here, would you agree that only, let's say, about 4 of them are in the subject region, in the St. Boniface Park? Is that not correct? you can tell by looking at the first two numbers of the roll. So you have debates, Beguine, debates, and the ones that start with 06. And you've got a couple on Dougal, but we'll talk about that after. Is that not correct?
I believe all of them except the larger square footage ones should be in the same market region.
Okay, but you're not suggesting that this property on Waverly is in the same industrial park as the St. Boniface Industrial Park, are you?
No, exactly. That
Dublin.
would be one of those large square footage. So that one and Salto and Mountain. Yeah, unfortunately, there was none with a large square footage that I could find as a good comparable. But the
Sorry,
one
but these are okay. But Mountain is the Inkster Industrial Park. Dublin is St. James. So these are all over the city, correct? These are not concentrated in the St. Boniface Industrial Park.
correct. I have them as the same market region, but
Okay. Okay, and then just very quickly, those two at 1525 Dougal, that's my client. Those are truck bays, correct?
I have one as a Maple bus line.
Right. And okay, but can we agree that, and you chose these yourself, correct?
Right.
Okay. So the two at 1525 Dougal, units 8 and 9, firstly, those are short leases, correct? They're under 5 years, they're 3 years only.
Right.
Okay. And they have wall heights of 20 feet, but these are, would you agree with me that these are truck based? So this is the type of property where you drive a truck in, you have a little workshop, and typically you can work on your truck, or trades people typically store their goods here before they go to a job. So my point is, it's a different type of property than a small bay flex industrial that we're dealing with on in subject, correct?
Sure.
Okay. And then if we look at the four, 82 and 88 debates and 90 and 96 Beguine, those rental indicators, can we agree that those are your best comps based on location, based on general comparability? They're 1980. I suppose they're potentially superior in some ways, but can we agree that those are the best comps for our subject?
I believe the Dublin ones are decent as well.
Okay, but if we were to use rental indicators in a different region, generally, would you not agree with me that we would have to make some adjustment for location? Okay.
I would agree.
So, okay. So if we look at debates and Beguine, even if you don't agree that they're the best indicators, those are clearly running from $695 to $725 a foot, correct?
Yes.
Okay. And is that not in line with what is being reported on the rent roll as well?
I'm getting an $8 question. Actually, I didn't get to see what the actual is. I just saw the variety of rental rates there.
Okay, that's fine. I can get to that in my discussion. In terms of the city's position on vacancy this cycle, is there any evidence supporting why different vacancy rates have been used for in different regions in the industrial market? I don't see anything about vacancy in your report. Is there any evidence to support your vacancy rate of 1.5%?
They are model generated based on the area, typically.
Okay. But nothing to support that, to be fair, in your evidence.
No.
Okay. And that cap rate of 6.15, that is model generated as well. And once again, there are no sales to support that. Okay. And can we agree that based on the broker's report that you've submitted here, can we agree that this would typically be considered, well, certainly B, so this would be between multi-tenant B and industrial B, and it would appear, based on your evidence, that the brokers are suggesting a range of 6 to 7.5, correct?
That they are, yes.
Okay, so is there any reason why this property is being treated by the model in such a way that it is falling on call it their 20th percentile, their sort of better range? Is there something about this property that would indicate that it would be on the lower end?
Well, it is still within our own industrial range. So it's not like it's lower than our 20th percentile. We do have this treated as a lower risk property.
Right. Okay. And just to be clear, in looking at your this chart, the city is not bifurcating between quality, so that it doesn't appear that there's an adjustment for A grade space, let's say, or Class B space. It's simply been all, from what I can see here, it looks as though everything has been applied a range of 5.35 to 7.3. Is that correct?
Correct.
Okay. Okay, Madam Chair, I think those are my questions. Thank you very much, Mr. Rockney.
Hi, thank you. Mr. Story, any questions?
Oh, yeah,
Oh, I'm sorry, Mr. Merritt.
it's okay.
Are there more?
Round two.
Sorry, Mr. Merritt?
Mr. Merritt, you're on mute.
Okay, sorry about that. Mr. Rockney, you get a chance to inspect this property, or did you ever drive past it or know anything about it?
I have not inspected it, but I have done a drive-by as my daughter actually has a sport nearby. So I've been able to see the whereabouts and what it looks like.
I have no further questions, Madam Chairperson. Thank you.
Thank you. And Ms. McFadden, any questions to the assessor?
Sure, Mr. Rockney, the advertisements that you showed us with a net rent of $8.95, would you agree that an asking rent does not necessarily equate to an actual rental rate?
Of course.
And this is higher than what the actual buildings are being rented out at?
Exactly.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you. And my questions have been asked and answered. Mr. Story, if you would like to proceed.
Yes, thank you, Madam Chair, and thank you, Ms. McFadden. I neglected to ask that question about the asking rent, and just to be clear, we would typically look at an asking rent, and as a internal practice, we would typically apply 80% of an asking rent to determine what a market rent might be. So in that case, it would be about $7.16 based on the ask. Okay, so here we are at 115 debates. So I've not had the opportunity to inspect the interior of the property, but I've certainly been through this area many a time. I can suggest to you that this would be a standard quality older industrial property that is very typical in our city. So okay. So once again, we've looked to the actual contract rents. Now, sorry, and I do note that the wall heights range from 16 feet to 21 feet. However, we do lose about 2 feet to the clear height. So in some cases, the clear heights are only 14 feet in this building. So that would not be considered positive, but it is a flex warehouse. So it would likely be competing for a smaller swath of industrial tenants. So if somebody was looking for a 22-foot wall height, this would not be generally the place for them. But that 14-foot wall height is still considered extremely low. We have M2 zoning, and we have a sub-3 land to building at 2.88 to 1. Again, we've looked to the contract rents. Those are included for you on page 12. You can see the lease start dates are certainly germane to our reference date, and where they are slightly older, you can see where the rental steps are. So there we're dealing with 22, 23, and 24. So we are right in line with the reference date, and we do believe that these the contract rent is a better indicator of the property's potential performance as opposed to looking to rents across the city and then having to make adjustments for all sorts of factors. So these are the rents in place, and I do point out, Madam Chair, that if you were purchasing this property, these are the rents that you would be purchasing. So I think that we're I think it's appropriate to use these contract rents in this case. We have taken a secondary check on the market to ensure we are at market. So you can see on page 13. I have a bunch of rents for what I'm going to call, well, we've got flex warehouses in the St. Boniface Industrial Park, and they are all sort of in that 1979 to 1990 range. The St. Boniface Industrial Park is the second largest industrial park in the city of Winnipeg. So from my perspective, there would be no reason to go to a different part of town to look for comps when we have such a big data set from which to draw right here in our own backyard. So we're applying 787. The only adjustment we've made there is that $8 rent for the vacant space. As I mentioned, you know, there's an asking rent of $8.95. So I think we're being quite optimistic. We could very well be applying something like $7.25 to that space, but I feel comfortable with an overall blended rent of $7.87 across the board here. And if you look at our rental comps, we may actually be higher than market. So vacancy, the vacancy at the reference date was 12.48%. We would typically expect to see a higher degree of vacancy in properties like this. There is more turnover, there are more units, and we've included the Johnson report, Madam Chair, and that'll show you that's Mr. Wayne Johnson's report that he puts out every year, and that would be considered the industry standard for determining industrial vacancy in our market. So when we look to St. Boniface, single tenant's not germane to our discussion, but we can see 2.6 in 2022 overall. But then if we get to the multi-tenant vacancy, it's 5.4% in 2022. And then the overall investment vacancy by district is 6.6. So between 5.4 and 6.6, and considering the actual vacancy of 12.48, we've applied 6%. And that accounts for collection loss as well. So we think we're well supported there based on the evidence that we've submitted. Again, you have our full capitalization rate study as a standalone that explains all of our assumptions going in and our support from the market. And it is summarized for you in each brief here. But ultimately, we've only applied a cap rate of 6.5%, which would be considered very much a middle of the road cap rate for this very typical flex industrial property, older, late 70s, early 80s in an established industrial zone. So ultimately, based on the fact that we've used contract rents, we've used a vacancy that is more in line with the actual performance of the subject, and with a capitalization rate that is frankly right down the middle of the road for a property such as this, we come to an indicated market value of $3,556,475, which we then round to $3,556,000. The balance of the brief includes the rent roll information and the city's workup. So ultimately, based on a site-specific review of this property and its actual performances of the reference date, we feel well supported at $3,556,000. And with that, I'm happy to take your questions, and I thank you.
Thank you. Any questions, Ms. Durakami?
We do have one on your page 12 with the actual rents. I just noticed about the step up of rent. So just curious as to the rent you provided. Is that the base or is that part of the step up?
Yeah, that's a great question. So what we do is for the purpose of our exercise, we try to look at what a potential purchaser would be seeing. So if there was a contract rent that had a step up that's occurring within about a year, let's say, of acquisition, we would use that higher rent. So if you have a step up that goes, for example, from $750 a foot to $775, we would use $775 as the purchaser would be anticipating the higher rent, and I think that's fair. So that is how we treat step ups, and I think that is well supported by how the market would view the property. If you were purchasing it and you knew that there was rent escalation coming shortly, you would work your numbers based on that escalation as opposed to the previous value or the previous figure that would be adjusted for.
Thank you so much. Those are all my questions.
Thank you. Ms. McFadden, any questions?
Just to clarify, the vacancy rate of 6% is not based on an actual vacancy rent that has been gone on. It's based on industry standards for that area. Is that, am I understanding correctly?
It's yes, it's a combination this we've had. So when our vacancy at the reference date was 12.48%, so that's fairly high. But the two best indicators from the Johnson report suggest, I believe it's 6.4 and 5.6. So if we average those out, we get to 6%. So I'm using half of actual, but something above. As I mentioned, we would likely see, and obviously it depends on where we are, it depends on the nature of the property and some other factors, but we would, as a general comment, we would expect to see somewhere between 2.5% and 4.5%. So I've adjusted it up to 6% based on the actual performance as supported by the Johnson report. So it's a bit of a yes, you're correct. We're looking to the market indicators, but we're also considering the actual vacancy and the actual performance of the asset.
And is that a 1-year actual, or do you have some evidence that it?
Oh, it's a good. You know what? That's a good question. I haven't made an adjustment for a long-term chronic vacancy. I don't recall, to be fair. I know that when I look through it, typically I'll put if there is a long-term vacancy concern, we likely would have used something higher. So I can't say for certain, but that is the vacancy as of the reference date. But I don't believe it was a short blip. I believe that there has been vacancy in this property for, 1 or 2 units over time, and that's frankly that's to be expected in a flex property such as this.
Okay, thank you. That's all my questions.
Thank you. And Mr. Merritt?
I have none, Madam Chairperson. Thank you.
I also have no questions. Does either party have a wish for a summation on this property?
I do not. Thank you, Madam Chair.
Just very quickly, Madam Chair, we would just respectfully submit that the site-specific analysis of the property is a better indicator of market value than the model assessment at this stage, and we would respectfully submit that our submission be given weighted consideration on that basis. And I thank you.
I thank you. We will then move on to item number 7, 141 debates, and again, just to reiterate, the non-co-op has been withdrawn on this property. And Mr. Rockney, whenever you are ready to proceed.
Thank you, Madam Chair. File number 24-1618 for roll number 060530900900 for the address of 141 Debate Street. We're defending the assessed value of $4,437,000 for the 2025 roll year based on the reference date of April 1, 2023. It consists of 2 buildings with 6 premises with 1 story. Actually, year built 1979 to 1981. We do have an effective year built of 1979. Wall height of 18 to 20 feet. Leasable area is 35,020 square feet and a land to plan area of 2.44. The income and expense questionnaire we received is on page 19 through 22. On page 21, there's a list of the variety of rents. There are aerial photos provided on page 23 through 25 and some exterior photos following it. We've provided many rent comparables due to the 6 premises having different square footage. On page 28 and 29, sorry, on 28. All are flex warehouses like the subject. With leasing starting in 2018 to 2022, an area range of 3,000 square feet to 10,722 square feet, wall height of 11 to 24 feet, an effective year built of 1971 to 1980, and a net rent of $7.50 to $10 per square foot. Our income workup is provided. There's 6 premises that add up to 35,020 square feet with a blended rent of $8.35. Provide a potential rent of $292 $104,119. We reduced that by a vacancy loss of 1.5% plus expenses at 3% with the shortfall at $4 per square foot. This gives us the net operating income of $277,291. We've capitalized that at 6.25%, in which generates our capitalized value of $4,437,000. Our capitalization rates are on page 32. Our 6.25% is in the middle of our industrial range. There are some recent permits for interior alterations in the years of 2017, 2019, and 2022, with the declared construction value of $154 and $235. Based on this evidence, we believe that the assessed value of $4,437,000 to be fair and equitable, and ask for it to be confirmed. Thank you.
Thank you. Any questions, Mr. Story?
Yes, I do. Mr. Rockney, this assessment is all model derived. It's not been adjusted by anyone at the department. This is simply a work of the model. Is that fair?
Correct. Yes.
Okay. Okay, and just very quickly again, so the rents that you've used here, is it safe to say you haven't considered the actual rents in place for the purpose of our exercise today?
No.
Okay, and the rental indicators that you've used to support the model's rent, none of these are in the St. Boniface Industrial Park, correct?
We do have some in the same market region. It being 60 Hoka and McLeod and Dugald.
Okay, but McLeod is that's Elmwood River East, effectively, is it not?
See, her market regions sometimes go very large, depending.
Right. Okay. And I ask that too because the 400 block of McPhillips, that would be where the casino is, correct? So that would be a fair ways away from the St. Boniface Industrial Park, would it not?
Yeah, so not McPhillips. McPhillips wouldn't be considered in the same market region.
Oh, okay. Okay. All right. And then once again, now this is, can we agree this is effectively a sister building to the previous one that we looked at there? But the model has outputted some of those figures differently. Do you know why it doesn't treat them exactly the same? Is it something to do with land to building or number of premise, or why is it not exactly the same if they're almost identical?
Yeah, I mean they're close. Definitely the rent is close and the cap is close. They're not far off, but definitely the effective age of the previous one is a bit newer. It's got a 1982 effective age, whereas this one's 1979. A bit of the land to plan area is a bit different, as well as the leasable area a little bit as well.
Okay, so that all affects the output of the model. Now, in terms of that vacancy loss, can we agree that these properties, as we've learned from the previous, they typically carry or have a higher vacancy risk? Is that a fair comment in your mind?
Not that I'm aware of. All I'm seeing is that there's one of the space that is currently vacant, but we have not looked at the chronic vacancy at all.
And well, beyond chronic vacancy, that 1.5% would be considered very low. Now, would that consider collection loss potentially, or is that strict physical vacancy?
As far as I am aware, it's with vacancy, and it's just model driven based on the area.
Okay. Okay, it's simply model driven, and I'll ask Madam Chair that my questions regarding the cap rate carry forward. They're all exactly the same for this file as they were for the previous. Thank you, Mr. Rockney. Those are my questions.
Welcome. Thank you. Mr. Merritt, any questions?
Yes, Madam Chairperson. Mr. Rockney, the applicant had said that this is like a sister to 115 debates, but I noticed that the square footage is, I guess you have got 2,000 more, so they're not really sisters, or are they?
It's a good question. I mean, they were built the same time. Um,
I just noticed that uh, Mr. Story's got 33,000 for this property as that's the square footage in 115 debate. So I'm just wondering where you got your 35,000. So,
Actually, it's
or
yeah, no, that is a good question.
yeah. So when you looked at the leases, etc., it all points to the 35. Probably it's all totals that.
I believe so, and I'm gonna quickly do a quick
Yeah.
add up here from our records, but it is what we have had in our records.
Well,
Um,
2,000 square feet is quite a bit.
yeah, yeah. Okay, that's 141 debates. One of the buildings is
Was
so
there
one
an
of-
add-on later, possibly?
no, I do have two buildings. Okay, one is 17,080 for the 18-foot, and the other one, 20-foot, is 17,780. Even that, there must, something's a bit off, definitely. I'm actually getting 34,860. Let me do that again. 17,780.
The rent roll indicates 33,225. And that's right from the
Your
exhibit.
rent roll, Mr.
Well,
Story, your rent roll or the city's?
well, the owner's rent roll, sir.
Okay.
It's strange.
Yeah.
Yeah, I'm
So-
getting 34,860 with adding the two
Yeah.
buildings here.
So that's going to change the value. So
Mhm.
I'm not sure what you want to do. Maybe you need some time to work out the number, or it's up to the chairperson. So that's all I really have to say.
I thank you. And Ms. McFadden, any questions?
I have no further questions.
Thank you. I also have no questions. Mr. Rockney, did you have a wish to change the number you've submitted or no?
Just I'm curious to see if we have a note in here, so I just want to quickly look as to why it pulls up as 35,020.
Want to take a few minutes?
Yeah, if that's okay.
All right. We will take a 5-minute recess.
Can we make it 10? Can we make it 10?
If you would like 10, we'll make it 10.
Please.
I thank you. I would like to call this hearing back to order. And Ms. Durakani, I believe you may have a different number for us on 141 Debate Street.
I did look at our records, and we would be keeping the same square footage that we have on record until we are able to do an inspection. Reason being is they're all broken down with the same square footage as we've had it. So we would have to make an inspection and see otherwise. It
Oh.
appears they aren't sister buildings because all the premises are different. One has 8 premises, the other one has 6, and they're all different square footage. So I do retract from that comment.
Okay, so you would like to have your value remain at the 4,437,000?
Correct.
All right, that is fine. Thank you. And Mr. Story, if you would like to give us your brief.
Yes, indeed. Thank you, Madam Chair. Now, while it's still top of mind, I just want to point out one element here. With regard to the square footage, if you go to the assessor's page 37, this is from ProREIT's website, and they are telling you very clearly that the GLA, gross leasable area, in this building is indeed 33,225. So it's to be blunt, it's not in their interest to underreport their square footage. They generate rent based on square footage, so to have that higher number would be in their interest, and so I would suggest to you that their public document as well as the rent roll support that 33,225. I do note on my front page though that I have the wrong GLA, and that's based on city record, and we'll adjust that going forward. But we have indeed used the actual square footage. Once again, we have used the contract rents in place. These are sister buildings. If you look at the if you take a look at the overhead, and then if you look at the street view, you can see that these properties are aesthetically they're virtually identical, and they run right next to each other. And I believe that the owner would likely benefit from common ownership in terms of using that parking lot and that sort of thing. So they are indeed sister buildings. We haven't used asking rents. I do note that on the city's evidence, they have an asking rent of $4.85. So I know we talked about asking rents versus actuals. We certainly haven't used that. We've looked to the actual rent in place, and we've considered some degree of actual vacancy. So over the 33,225 square feet, we have rents that range from $6.50 to $8.95. Now, while that is still a reasonably tight range, that is based on size. So as I mentioned, a majority of these properties or these premises in the St. Boniface Industrial, for these, call them late 70s, early 80s, small bay flex industrial, those rents are about $7 a foot. And you can see for the smaller premises in this property, the 3,380, there are two of them. One is at $750, and that's based on a step at March of 21, and there's one at $895. In the larger premises, you can see $675 to $650, and that makes sense when we consider that economies of scale would be at play here. So we have once again used the actual rents in place. The overall blended rent of $693 is well in line with what we would expect to see in this area. And once again, if we were expecting to see about $7 a foot, we have to consider economies of scale. So once again, we've used 6% based on a review of the actual vacancy in this area and with consideration to the type of property that we have here. And again, we've used a cap rate of 6.5%. And this is for the same reasons that we've applied 6.5% in the adjacent building. That's where we believe that cap rate ought to be for properties such as this vintage in this location. So I'm going fairly quickly through this one, but many of my comments will be, I would ask that they carry forward from the last property. This is almost identical. So ultimately, our methodology is exactly the same. And so ultimately that leads us to a value of $3,107,038, which we then round to $3,107,000. And we do respectfully request the modeled assessment be amended to better reflect the subject property's market value as of the economic reference date. I note that the model, for whatever reason, has increased the value of this property or the assessed value by 56%, which is extraordinarily high, cycle over cycle. It's surprised that wasn't reviewed, but this is where we are. I've included that figure on page 22, just so you're aware. The balance of the brief, again, includes the rent roll. The rent roll, once again, supports the square footage that we've applied that is in question. We have on page 29 of my brief is one of the same items that the assessor included in her brief, and it is indeed from the ProREIT website talking about this building. They are advertising clear heights of 14 feet only. Once again, that's similar to the previous property that we looked at. So, but it is indicating that the gross leasable area is 33,225. So we do believe that to be the correct figure, certainly for our purposes. So with all of that being said, Madam Chair, we do believe that our value of 3,107,000 is supported. The increase is extraordinarily high, and I believe what we've submitted here today supports that reduction. So I will leave my presentation there, and I'm happy to take your questions, and I thank you.
Thank you. And Ms. Durochny, any questions for Mr. Story?
Possibly in regards to the square footage. Mr. Story, would you happen to know if there's been a change in the square footage over time in regards to maybe the mezzanine space aspect?
I don't think so, and I don't think we would typically see a mezzanine in a 14-foot buildings with 14-foot heights. So no, I don't know why the city's square footage is off, but I would certainly defer to the rent roll that the owner has submitted, and certainly the public-facing document that they put out to advertise the space. So I'm not sure why the city has what I'll suggest is an erroneous square footage, but certainly we are aligned in our valuation to the owner's 33,225.
So I'm just trying to, I'm trying to understand it myself. I'm just trying to look at our permits here. There's the top one, in the interior alterations. There's something about removal of stairs to mezzanine and replace with a ladder to access service area.
Okay,
So
I
I'm
don't
not
think
sure.
that's going to lead to an extra 2,000 square feet of leasable area. So, and typically, Mr. Rockney, and you'll be aware of this, when we see mezz space in properties such as this, it's not typically applied a separate rental rate in the market. It would be included, but I can't warrant that there's mezzanine space or whatever. And certainly the owner is not suggesting that there is that extra space. So I'm not sure why there's that disparity, but on balance, the evidence would seem to suggest that the 33,225 makes more sense than the city's figure. So
Again, I'm trying to make sense why the 16,005 leasable area is different to all our many premises. Trying to see where that kind of got changed around. But I would foresee an inspection this near future.
sounds good.
Thank you so much. Those are my questions.
Thank you. And Mr. Merritt, any questions?
I have no questions. Thank you very kindly. I think we have to really figure out the square footage of the building. So
Thank you.
thank you.
And Ms. McFadden?
I have no questions. Thank you.
Thank you. Mr. Story, I just have one question about the sale.
Yes.
Was this also part of the portfolio that the previous property was included in?
Yes, indeed. So this was a sale of 8 buildings from QuadReal, so obviously a large industrial institutional owner investor, to ProREIT, a real estate investment trust. So from one large investment firm to another, and with 8 properties included. So a large portfolio sale. We would not typically consider those individualized values at market or typical of market. And obviously the REITs have different motivations, and they are, as a general comment, are able to avail themselves of preferential or better financing. So, and the IAAO standard by which the assessor is generally bound, by my understanding, would indicate that those large portfolio sales are not generally considered for ratio studies and should be looked at with potentially some adjustment for those atypical factors. So yes, we are not considering the sale value to be typical of market as it was part of a larger portfolio.
All right, I thank you. Does either party have a wish for a summation on this property? No?
No, just very quickly, I believe that our workup here is based on the actual site-specific review of the property, and would respectfully submit that the contract rents, for example, or the actual vacancy forecast is more is closer to a market view than the modeled assessment. Would respectfully request that the board adjust the value on that basis, and I thank you.
All right, I thank you, Mr. Story. And I believe we've heard all your properties.
Yes, indeed.
So thank you for your presentation and time.
Thank you.
Wonderful. Thank you, everyone.
Thank you, Mr. Story.
Thank you.
Thank you, everyone.
So we.
have
Assessor
one
is
more.
supposed to be here. Okay.
I'm sorry, Ms. Sharma?
I think the assessor is the same. So assessor is supposed to be here for the last item.
Yes,
Yes.
she is.
Yeah.
Yeah,
Okay.
okay.
I'm just gonna
Good.
email her quickly.
She went.
Would
Oh,
she
all right.
say goodbye?
Yeah, she said goodbye and left.
Okay, no.
No, I thought
have
she
one
was
more.
saying goodbye to Mr. Story. Goodness.
That's
what
what
I
I thought, but then.
Yeah.
Oh,
Okay, I think we'll go back on recess and we'll see once she's back and we can come back. Okay.
all right. So we'll take 5 minutes, a 5-minute
Yeah.
recess.
Okay,
Right.
good,
Thank you, Ms. Sharma.
good.
I thank you. I would like to call this hearing back to order. We are going to hear the last item on the docket today, item number 8, which is 50 Valde Avenue. We do not have an applicant present, and there is a non-co-op on this property. So Ms. Durochny, if we can deal with that first, please.
Of course. Thank you, Madam Chair. This is for file number 24-1327, roll number 0900487250 for the address of 50 Valde Avenue. We are seeking non-compliance. On our page 3 is the tracking number for the documents that were mailed out. Page 4 is a signature we received with that same tracking number up at the top. The letter that was mailed out is provided on page 5 through 8. That was the first letter dated April 13, 2023. And the tracking number on page 9 is the second document dated June 9th, 2023. That's page 9 through 12 for the income and expense questionnaire that was mailed out. And we did not receive anything provided to us. Therefore, we're seeking non-compliance.
I thank you. And Mr. Merritt, do you have any questions to the assessor regarding this non-compliance?
I have none, thank you.
Thank you. And Ms. McFadden, any questions?
No, I have none, thank you.
Thank you. I also have no questions. We will just take a very short recess to discuss this issue. I thank you. I would like to call this hearing back to order. And the panel has discussed the non-co-op issue with 50 Valde Avenue, and we have granted the non-co-op. And Ms. Durochny, if you would like to proceed and read out your evidence, thank you.
Thank you, Madam Chair. We are defending the assessed value of $1,621,000 for the 2025 year roll based on the reference date of April 1, 2023. It consists of one building with one premise, 2 stories, an actual and effective year built of 2021 with a wall height of 11 feet, a leasable area of 7,400 square feet, and a land to plan area of 29.21. If I can turn your attention to page 13, are a few maps provided. It is located off of Day Street. Aerial views provided on page 14 and 15. Exterior photos on page 16. Rent comparables are on our page 17. We've provided 8 rent comparables with the leasing starting in 2016 to 2020. An area range of 5,000 to 9,800 square feet. A wall height of 24 to 31 feet, an effective year built of 2014 to 2021, and a net rent of $9.95 to $22.28 per square foot. Some land comparable sales are provided on page 18 with their aerial views following. Our income workup is on page 21. The one premise of 7,400 square feet with a rent of $10.25 per square foot, provide a potential rent of $75,850. We've reduced that by a vacancy loss of 1.5% plus expenses at 3%, with the shortfall at $3.85 per square foot. This gives us the net operating income of $72,027. We've capitalized that at 5.45%, in which generates our capitalized value of $1,322,000, with an additional land value of $299,000. Adds up to our final value of $1,621,000. Our capitalization rates are on page 23, in which our 5.45% is within our industrial range. And therefore, based on this evidence, we believe that the assessed value of $1,621,000 to be fair and equitable, and ask for it to be confirmed. Thank you.
I thank you. Any questions, Mr. Merritt?
Just one, Mr. Rockney, when you prepare these briefs, the applicant has got, when did they come down and pick up their copy, or what exactly is the exchange? Do you know offhand?
That's a fair question. Usually the exchange is done by email.
Okay. So was there any exchange that you know
I
of?
did not receive anything, no.
Okay. I think that's all the questions I have, Ms. Chairperson. Thank you.
Thank you. And Ms. McFadden?
I have none, thank you.
Thank you. I also have no question. Well, just one quick question, Mr. Rockney. You did not hear from the applicant directly?
No, I did not.
All right, I thank you. We did receive a brief letter from the applicant, which the panel will have a look at. And I thank you for your briefs this afternoon. And we have heard all the items on the docket, and this hearing is adjourned.
Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Bye.
Bye-bye.